Hey guys, it's Nick, and the trade deadline is just around the corner, and the Chicago Blackhawks most likely will be selling at this year's deadline. And it's going to be strange to see them sell where last year they weren't a playoff team. They didn't do anything at the deadline. 2 years ago, they did a slight trade to get a first round pick that turned out to be Nick Badin for trading Ryan Hartman to the Nashville Predators. This year, I think the Hawks probably will be selling due to the fact after their Canadian road trip that they just had, playing Winnipeg, uh, Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, and then Winnipeg to end it off. Not in that order, but you know what I mean. They only won one game, and they got a total of 2 points out of that 5-game road trip. Not good there. That pretty much set the fate on the Chicago Blackhawks this year, because that's 10 points that they did not get. And when that happens, not good to see a team basically go to the deadline, not in a playoff spot already, but battling for it, but now basically set their basically put the dagger in the coffin on their season by saying it's time to sell. It feels like. As you saw in my thumbnail, I did put 3 players on there that I think might actually get moved. It is Eric Gustafsson. I honestly do believe Gustafsson is going to get traded. Corey Crawford, which is hard to say Crawford, but I feel like Crow might be on the move, even though I wish he could just retire as Chicago Blackhawk. I'm always been a fan of Corey Crawford. And then a player with an extra year on his contract, and Brandon Saad. You may be asking why Brandon Saad, but I have the feeling that we could get a lot for Saad in his, just because his value is at a high this season because he's having a hell of a season for himself. Eric Gustafsson, they probably should have traded him last year, a 60-point defenseman last year, and they could have got probably a couple good solid picks out of it. This year, he's an unrestricted free agent, and he was looking to get paid, but I don't think the Hawks are going to keep him, and they already have a good young offensive defenseman in Adam Boqvist getting already playing with Duncan Keith on the top defensive pairing. Gustafsson, I feel like does get moved just because he is a rental. He's not playing that well with the Hawks this year, even though he still has his good chemistry with Patrick Kane, of course. But I think we move Gustafsson because we probably won't be re-signing him at the end of the year, and I just don't see Gustafsson staying a Chicago Blackhawk. He just probably gets moved to a team that needs an offensive defenseman for a playoff push. And the reason why I say that is because there could be a team out there that could offer up maybe a third and a prospect for Gustafsson, which the Hawks can use. Any draft pick's good for a team that isn't a retool. I'm not saying full-blown rebuild because we still have Kane, Taves, and Keith. But a player from the core could be moved, but they probably would have to ask him for his 10-team list and Corey Crawford. It's a shame to say that because he's one of the best goalies in team history, and they might have to move him at the deadline because I feel like they want to go for trying to keep Robin Lehner, which I understand because of the age part and Crawford injury history, but I can see Crow being moved at the deadline to a team. If he puts like a team like Colorado on his list of teams that he would be willing to be traded to, I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado comes calling and asking about Crawford, because Philip Grubauer is currently injured, and Crawford has the 2 Stanley Cup rings. He has the history of going far in the playoffs, and the Avalanche look to be a team that could go far in the playoffs. So I could see a team like that go and say, we do need a goalie right now to keep our playoff race going and maybe a potential division win. Crawford could be that type of goalie. With a better defense, a better offense, I think Crawford could still have a good run. This year, our defense is one of the worst technically in the league by giving up high quality chances. And then our PK is pretty good, but our goalies do save the team from getting basically absolutely murdered on ice. So I could see Crawford getting dealt to a team that's looking for a playoff race, but the Hawks will have to ask Crawford for a list of teams because he has his modified no movement clause on his contract. So it will be a little bit harder to trade Crawford than let him. It will just be a little bit harder to trade Crawford, if you understand what I mean. But for the fact that I have Brandon Saad on this list, that could be a potential player to be moved at the deadline. A team like Edmonton, maybe, or a team like Boston could be looking for a player like Brandon Saad, a good power forward who's having a great season with 2 Stanley Cup rings. That can bring some interest by a GM of a different team. Edmonton's been leaked with Saad a lot this season. Wouldn't surprise me if they try going after him. But the Hawks will be looking to probably get multiple draft picks for Saad. Maybe they could try and take 2 second-round picks, or maybe a first if the team's like a highly praised team to maybe make a long run in the playoffs. I don't know what we could get fully for Saad, but we could probably get a prospect, maybe 2 draft picks, or maybe a first-round pick. I don't know. We can get a lot because he does have a year on his contract left. And sometimes GMs like having an extra year of flexibility with a player on contract instead of just getting a rental and then the player leaves for nothing after the season. So this is an interesting move if the Hawks could trade Brandon Saad. I do not want to see Saad traded. I like Saad. He plays great this year, and he's honestly has played well for the Hawks. But if the Hawks can get something to help build their future, it might be an interesting move to make if they get the right return. Maybe they do, maybe they don't trade Saad. It's a possibility either way. Trade deadline is a crazy time of year. GMs make overpayments. We saw that with the New York Islanders trading for Andy Green. In my opinion, they traded away, in my opinion, too much for Andy Green. But we don't. This is just something to say that the Hawks are going to probably sell, and we have some players that we most likely move, like Saad, Crawford, and Gustafsson. Gustafsson more than likely is a highly picked player around Chicago to be moved. So this is an interesting time to say for GM Stan Bowman of what to do with this team, on what to gain assets for the future, or sit back and do nothing like he did last year. So, I want to hear what players you think could be moved on at the trade deadline on the Chicago Blackhawks. And thank you for watching the broadcast. Please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Trade deadline day, there will be a live stream. And most of all, let's go Hawks.